Hi everyone, my name is Tom. Today, I share with you my personal journey, how I wanted to practice speaking English, but didn't have a teacher. It's a story of fear, mistakes, courage, and finally finding my own voice. Part 1. The lonely struggle. I have always wanted to speak English. Not just to pass exams, not just to memorize words from a textbook, but to really speak, to open my mouth and let the language flow like a river. I imagined myself talking. Two strangers, traveling the world, working confidently in an international job. I imagined my voice carrying meaning in another language, strong and free. But imagination is one thing. Reality is another dot. In reality, my English world was silent. I didn't have a teacher. No private classes, no fluent friends, no mentor to guide me. At school, English lessons felt mechanical grammar drills. Fill in the blanks, endless exercises that left no space for speaking. The teacher had to handle 40 students at once. We barely spoke more than a few sentences in each class and outside of school. There was no one to practice with, so I sat alone in my room, dreaming of speaking, yet unable to practice. I wanted so much, but the silence around me grew heavier each day. Sometimes I tried speaking to myself. I would sit in front of the mirror, whispering, "Hello, my name is," or "How are you today?" But the sound of my own voice embarrassed me. It felt strange, unnatural, almost like an imposter's voice. Then gave up. The loneliness of learning without a teacher is not only about the lack of correction or feedback. It is about the lack of witnesses. Language is meant to be shared. It is not a secret you keep locked in your head. It is a bridge that connects you to another soul. And without someone to listen, every word I practiced felt meaningless, like a letter thrown into the ocean with no one to read it. I envied my classmates who went to language centers after school. They had real teachers, real classmates, real practice. I watched them improve, slowly but steadily, while I stayed stuck. I envied the YouTubers and influencers who spoke English so fluently, smiling into their cameras as if speaking were as easy as breathing. They seemed to live in another universe, one where English was natural, effortless, alive, and me. I began to avoid speaking altogether. When a tourist asked for directions on the street, I panicked and pointed silently instead of answering. When a foreigner appeared in a cafe, I lowered my head, afraid they might talk to me. The thought of speaking in English made my heart race and my mouth dry. It was ironic I wanted so desperately to speak. Yet fear and loneliness stopped me every time, at night, lying in bed. Someone patient, someone encouraging, someone who would listen without judgment. I imagined them correcting my mistakes gently, praising my effort, guiding me step by step. The dream of a teacher became a symbol of safety, of hope. But when morning came, reality returned. There was no teacher, only me. The struggle began to feel heavier than I could carry. Some days, I thought about giving up. Maybe English is not for me. Maybe speaking is only for the lucky ones, those who have teachers, those who live abroad, those who have natural talent, but deep inside, I couldn't let go of the dream. Because the truth is, my desire to speak was not only about English. It was about freedom. It was about breaking the cage of silence that had trapped me since childhood. It was about having a voice that could reach further, connect deeper, and carry me into a larger world. So I stayed in the struggle. Alone, I repeated words under my breath while walking to school. Alone, I copied sentences from my old textbooks, whispering them late at night when no one could hear. Alone, I listened to English songs, mumbling along to lyrics I barely understood. Each attempt felt like throwing seeds into dry soil. There was no water, no sunlight, no gardener to guide their growth. But something in me refused to stop planting, and perhaps, though I didn't know it then, the very loneliness I hated so much was shaping me. It was teaching me patience. It was sharpening my hunger. It was preparing me for something more. At that time, though, all I felt was struggle. Heavy, endless struggle. The world outside my window seemed to move so fast. People laughing, talking, living, connecting. And me, sitting in silence, holding words inside that I could not release. I wanted to scream, sometimes not in English, not in any language, just scream out the frustration of wanting and not having. But instead, I sat quietly, whispering broken English sentences into the air, sentences that no one heard, sentences that felt like they belonged to no one. It was a lonely fight, and I didn't know if I could win. Yet in that loneliness, something small was alive. A spark, a whisper, a voice inside me saying, "Don't give up. One day, this silence will break." I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but even in the darkest moments, I held on to that fragile belief, because somewhere deep in my heart, I knew the struggle itself was the beginning of the story. Part 2. The Mirror of Silence. There is a mirror in my room. It hangs above my desk, a plain square of glass that reflects my face, my books, my unfinished dreams. For a long time, I avoided it. Mirrors are dangerous. They do not lie. But one evening, after another day of silence, I pulled the chair closer and forced myself to sit in front of it. I wanted to see if I could speak, not to people, not to a teacher, just to my own reflection. At first, I only stared. My face looked back at me, nervous, doubtful. My lips pressed together as if they were afraid of opening. I whispered, "Hello." The word came out small, thin, almost invisible. The mirror didn't answer, of course. But in that silence, I felt the weight of my own voice. I tried again. "My name is." Then I stopped. The sound of English in my mouth felt strange, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. My voice was stiff, artificial, like an actor reading lines in a play he doesn't believe in. I laughed nervously, then frowned. The mirror showed my weakness, my hesitation, my fear. It reflected not only my face, but also the truth I wanted to hide. I didn't trust my own voice. The silence after each sentence was unbearable. When you speak to another person, their eyes, their nods, their replies fill the space. But with the mirror, the silence was absolute. I heard only the echo of my broken words inside my head, and yet that something about that silence fascinated me. Day after day, I returned to the mirror. I practiced greetings, questions, short answers. I practiced describing my day. I wake up at 6. I eat breakfast. I go to school. My reflection listened without judgment, but it also judged me in another way. Its silent gaze asks me, "Is this really your best? Is this the voice you are afraid to share with the world?" Sometimes I grew angry. I shouted at the mirror, repeating sentences louder and louder. "I want to speak English. I can speak English." My reflection shouted back, silently, lips moving with mine. But the room remained empty of replies. Other times, I whispered softly, as if speaking to a friend who was about to leave. "Please, stay with me. Don't disappear. I need someone to listen." And still, the mirror said nothing. The silence became a paradox. On one hand, it was lonely and painful, reminding me that I had no teacher, no partner, no real listener. On the other hand, it was safe. In front of the mirror, I could make mistakes freely. I could stutter, mispronounce, forget words, and no one laughed. No one criticized. No one turned away. The mirror became both my enemy and my ally. One evening, I noticed something strange. As I repeated a sentence, "I want to learn English," my reflection's lips moved in perfect rhythm with mine. And suddenly, it felt as if I were not alone. For a brief moment, I imagined that the person in the mirror was another student practicing with me. I was both the teacher and the learner, both the speaker and the listener. The thought startled me. Could it be that I didn't need a teacher all the time? Could I learn to listen to myself, to teach myself? Of course, doubt quickly followed. Don't be silly, I told myself. You can't correct your own mistakes. You don't know what sounds right. A mirror is not a person, and yet, deep inside, I felt a spark of possibility. The silence was not only emptiness, it was also a space where my voice could grow if I dared to keep speaking into it. So I continued. I began to spend 15, 20 minutes each night in front of the mirror. Sometimes I described objects in my room. This is a book. That is a pen. The pen is blue. Other times, I pretended to have conversations. How are you today? I'm fine, thank you. And you? I am good. What did you do today? I went to school. I studied math. It was childish, mechanical, even ridiculous. But slowly, something shifted. My tongue loosened. My sentences grew longer. The mirror taught me something no teacher had ever said. Speaking is not about perfection. It is about permission. Permission to let sound exist. Permission to fill the silence with your own voice. Still, the loneliness remained. Each night, after practice, I would turn off the light and feel the emptiness return. I longed for real conversation, real laughter, real connection. The mirror could not give me that. But maybe, just maybe it was teaching me to survive until the day I could find it. The mirror of silence was both cruel and kind. Cruel, because it reminded me of everything I lacked. Kind, because it gave me the courage to start. And sometimes, in the stillness of the night, when my reflection and I whispered English words together, I felt a strange truth. Even silence can be a teacher. Part 3. Shadows of comparison. Every time I thought I was making progress, the shadows of comparison returned to haunt me. At school, I watched classmates who had tutors or who attended English centers after class. They carried glossy textbooks, spoke with more confidence, and sometimes even joked in English with each other. When the teacher asked questions, they answered quickly, their voices steady and strong. I sat in silence, my heart pounding. I wanted to raise my hand, but fear nailed it to the desk. My classmates' voices sounded like trumpets, bright, powerful, alive. My own voice, by contrast, felt like a broken flute, unable to produce a proper note. At lunch, I overheard them talking about their English teachers. My tutor says my pronunciation is improving. Our class is preparing for a speech contest. Yesterday, we practiced debating in English. It was so fun. Their laughter stung. I forced a smile, nodding as if I understood. But inside, envy boiled. Why not me? Why don't I have that chance? The shadows grew darker when I went online. YouTube overflowed with people speaking fluent English, smiling influencers who seemed to breathe English as naturally as air. Their sentences flowed without hesitation, their accents crisp, their gestures confident. I envied them, too. Sometimes I replayed their videos again, not for the lesson, but to torture myself. Look at them, listen to them, and look at you still whispering to a mirror like a child. The comparison was poison each time I saw someone better. My motivation shrank. The little victories I had with a mirror suddenly felt meaningless. What was the point of practicing this? Is a book when others could discuss philosophy, politics, and love stories in perfect English. I began to think of myself as broken, incomplete. My mind whispered cruel words. You will never be like them. You will never catch up. Without a teacher, you are nothing. Sometimes I wondered if I should give up completely. If English was a mountain, maybe I was not strong enough to climb it. Maybe I was destined to stay at the bottom, watching others reach the top while I remained in the shadows. But even as envy consumed me, something curious happened. One day, scrolling through videos, I came across an interview with a famous English learner. The interviewer asked, "How did you become fluent?" The person laughed and said, "At first, I compared myself to everyone. I thought I was terrible. But then I realized comparison kills growth. My only job was to be better than I was yesterday." Words struck me like lightning. Better than I was yesterday. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. My reflection looked tired, my voice hesitant. But I remembered the words. I whispered to myself, "Yesterday, I was afraid to speak this sentence. Today, I can. That means I am better." The next day, I practiced narrating my routine. Yesterday, I could only say 3 sentences. Today, I managed 5. Better. The shift was small, but it was real. Yet the shadows of comparison still followed me. They did not disappear overnight. Each time I heard fluent English, the old envy returned. Each time I saw classmates advancing, my chest tightened with jealousy. But now, I also had a weapon, the reminder that my only rival was the person I had been yesterday. Sometimes, late at night, I imagined 2 versions of myself. The old me, silent and afraid, and the new me, still imperfect but braver. Between them stood a bridge of effort, built from hours of lonely practice. And I realized no YouTuber, no classmate, no teacher could walk that bridge for me. It was mine alone. The shadows of comparison would always exist. But I didn't have to live inside them. I could walk toward the light slowly, painfully, but step by step. And maybe, just maybe, one day the shadows would no longer frighten me. They would only remind me how far I had come. Part 4, A Spark of Curiosity, happened by accident. One night, tired from studying and drowning in self-doubt, I opened YouTube just to escape. I wasn't looking for English. I wanted music, distraction, anything to silence the noise in my head. But the algorithm had other plans. A thumbnail caught my eye. Learn English by shadowing. Speak like a native. I almost scrolled past. It sounded too good to be true, like all those magic method videos I never believed in. But something in me hesitated. Maybe curiosity, maybe desperation. I clicked. The video began with a cheerful teacher speaking directly to the camera. You don't need a partner to practice English, she said. You don't need a teacher. All you need is your own voice. Shadow me. Repeat everything I say, exactly as I say it. I frowned. Shadow, what does that even mean? But then she started. Hello, how are you today? Without thinking, I whispered, hello, how are you today? Her rhythm was steady, her tone natural. I tried to copy, but my version sounded clumsy, broken. Still, I continued. Sentence after sentence, I followed, my mouth struggling to keep up. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. The teacher's voice filled the silence, and my voice followed like an echo. She didn't laugh at my mistakes. She didn't correct me harshly. She just kept speaking, inviting me to join. At the end of the video, my throat was dry, my tongue tired, but my heart was alive. I had spoken more English in 10 minutes than in the entire week at school. I replayed the video. Again, I shadowed. Again, my voice trembled, cracked, stumbled, but again I spoke. Something lit up inside me. The next day, I searched for more. English shadowing practice, English listening podcast, Speak English with me. A whole world appeared. Teachers, podcasters, learners, all inviting me to repeat, to shadow, to speak. It felt like discovering a hidden door in a house I thought I knew. A door that opened into a vast new space. Of course, it wasn't easy. My mouth often lagged behind. Sometimes I froze when the sentences were too long. Sometimes I wanted to quit, embarrassed, even though no one else was watching. But every time I shadowed, I felt my fear shrinking. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with voices guiding me forward. One evening, I chose a podcast episode about daily routines. The speaker said, I wake up at 7 o'clock. I brush my teeth, I eat breakfast. I repeated, sentence by sentence. The rhythm felt almost like music. For the first time, English wasn't just study it, was performance. Like singing a song when the episode ended. I caught myself smiling. I remembered all the nights I had begged for a teacher, all the mornings I had cursed my loneliness. And now, here I was, practicing with voices from across the world. No tutor, no classroom, no scheduled me, my headphones, and my determination. The realization was electric. Maybe I don't need a teacher. Maybe I can be my own teacher. The thought scared me at first. Could I really guide myself? Could I really improve without anyone correcting me? But curiosity pushed the fear aside. I wanted to know what would happen if I kept going. I wanted to test this strange new method to see how far it could carry me. That night, I wrote in my notebook, experiment, shadowing, every day for 30 days. It wasn't a promise. It was a challenge. A spark. The next morning, I began again. 10 minutes before school, headphones in, repeating the cheerful voices of strangers who felt oddly like friends. My reflection in the mirror still looked awkward, but my voice sounded braver. The shadows of comparison didn't vanish, but they grew weaker. Because now I wasn't staring at what others had. I was holding something of my own. Curiosity had cracked the door open, and behind it, I sensed, was a path that could change everything. I didn't know yet that this spark would grow into fire. I didn't know yet how far shadowing and podcasts could take me. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't drowning in silence. I was speaking. And that was enough to keep me going. Part 5. First experiments when I wrote in my notebook. Shadowing every day for 30 days. I didn't know if I had the discipline to follow through. I wasn't someone who kept promises to myself easily. Many times I had said, I'll practice English tomorrow, only to spend the evening scrolling my phone or staring at the ceiling. But this time felt different. Maybe it was the curiosity, maybe the hunger, maybe the small taste of success from that first video. Whatever it was, I woke up the next morning with a plan. I decided to start small, 10 minutes a day. Not 1 hour, not half an hour, just 10 minutes. 10 minutes felt doable, almost too easy, so I put on my headphones, opened the same shadowing video, and began. Good morning. How are you today? Good morning. How are you today? The sentences flowed, familiar now. My tongue still stumbled, but less than yesterday. When the video ended, I glanced at the clock. 12 minutes had passed. I had gone beyond my goal without realizing it. That gave me confidence. Day by day, I experimented with new materials. Some days I chose podcasts with slow English, perfect for beginners. Other days, I picked movie clips. I remember the first time I shadowed a scene from Friends. The characters spoke so fast, I could barely catch a single word. I laughed at myself, gasping, stumbling, repeating nonsense. But even as I failed, I felt alive. Music became another tool. I chose English songs, playing them line by line, repeating every lyric. Singing was different from speaking, carried emotion, rhythm, breath. At first, my voice cracked, my timing off. But then something magical happened. The melody carried me, helping me pronounce words I had never managed before. I realized shadowing wasn't just about copying. It was about feeling. When I shadowed a podcast, I felt calm, steady. When I shadowed a movie, I felt playful, energized. When I shadowed a song, I felt free. Each experiment gave me a different flavor of English. Of course, it wasn't always easy. There were mornings when I didn't want to practice. My brain screamed, "Skip today, it doesn't matter." Then I would remember my notebook, the challenge I had set for myself. 30 days. I had to keep going. So even on the lazy days, I pressed play. Even if I only lasted 5 minutes, I spoke. Sometimes I felt progress immediately. But other times I felt stuck. My voice clumsy, my brain heavy. On those days, doubt returned. Am I really improving or just wasting time? To fight that doubt, I began recording myself. The first recording shocked me. My voice was shaky, my pronunciation messy. I almost deleted it immediately, but I forced myself to keep it, labeling it Day 1. 1 week later, I recorded again. My voice was still imperfect, but clearer. I could hear small changes, like tiny cracks of light through a wall, that kept me going. By the second week, I noticed something surprising. English words started appearing in my thoughts. When I looked at my toothbrush, I thought, brush teeth. When I poured water, I thought, drink water. My mind was slowly shifting, like a radio tuning to a new frequency. I shared this discovery with no one. It was my secret experiment, my private revolution. At school, I still sat quietly, still afraid to speak in class. But inside, I knew something was changing. The biggest surprise came during a family dinner. My cousin asked me about my favorite movie. Without thinking, I blurted out, "I like Harry Potter." The words came out smooth, natural. My family laughed not at me, but in delight. "Oh, English," my cousin cheered. My cheeks turned red, but inside I felt a spark of pride. That night, I realized my experiments were working. Shadowing, podcasts, songs, movies, they were all teachers. silent but powerful. I no longer felt completely alone. Every voice I shadowed became a guide. Every sentence I repeated became a step forward. And though 30 days had not yet passed, I already sensed that this was more than a challenge. It was becoming a habit, a way of living with English. The experiments were not just practice, they were proof. Proof that even without a teacher, even without a classroom, I could move forward. For the first time, I began to imagine a future where English was not a mountain, but a road. A long road, yes, but one I could walk. One step, one sentence at a time. And deep inside, a thought began to whisper, if I can do this for 30 days, what else is possible? Part 6. The Lonely Road. The first 30 days passed. I crossed out the last box in my notebook and stared at the neat little grid of check marks. 30 days of shadowing, 30 days of speaking aloud, 30 days of not giving up. I should have felt triumphant, and in some ways I did. My voice was stronger, my pronunciation clearer. I no longer froze when I tried to say simple sentences. I had proof that I could grow without a teacher. But after the excitement faded, a different feeling crept in. Loneliness. Shadowing was powerful. Yes. Podcasts were inspiring. Yes. Movies and songs were fun. Yes. But they were all one-way conversations. I spoke, but no one answered. I laughed at jokes, but no one laughed with me. There were nights when I closed my notebook and felt a heavy silence pressing against me. My voice echoed in my room, but it was only mine. No one corrected me. No one encouraged me. No one said, "Good job." I began to wonder, is this what my English journey will always feel like? A road I must walk alone. At school, my classmates still spoke more confidently than me. They had teachers, classmates, group projects. They laughed together in English, their mistakes softened by friendship. I had my headphones, my notebook, my reflection in the mirror. One day, during lunch, a group of them practiced a dialogue for English class. I listened quietly, pretending to eat, while envy gnawed at me. They stumbled over words, mispronounced sentences, but they stumbled together. I wanted that. Not perfection, not fluency, just someone to stumble with. That night, I shadowed a podcast about travel. The host described visiting New York City, the tall skyscrapers, the crowded subways, the bright lights of Times Square. I repeated every word, but as my voice followed hers, tears welled in my eyes. I wasn't crying because the sentences were hard. I was crying because the road felt endless, and I was walking it with no hand to hold. I wanted to quit. I wanted to throw away my notebook, delete the videos, and accept that English wasn't for me. After all, what was the point of speaking if no one heard me? But then, something inside whispered, "You've already come this far. Don't waste it." The next morning, instead of giving up, I changed my approach. I began talking to myself. Not just shadowing, but real conversations. I pretended to order food. "Hello, I'd like a sandwich, please." I pretended to ask for directions. "Excuse me, where is the train station?" I even pretended to argue with myself, switching between two roles, one asking questions, the other answering. It was strange, even a little silly, but it filled the silence. Slowly, I discovered that I didn't always need another person. Sometimes I could be my own partner. I also started journaling in English. At first, just 1 or 2 sentences. Today, I practiced shadowing. Tired but proud. Over time, the sentences grew into paragraphs. Writing gave me another voice, another way to talk to myself, another companion on the road. And then something unexpected happened. One evening, my younger brother walked past my room and heard me speaking aloud. He peeked in, laughed, and said, "Are you talking to yourself?" I froze, embarrassed. But then he added, "Teach me some English, too." That night, for the first time, I wasn't alone. I taught him simple greetings, and he repeated after me. His laughter filled the room, clumsy but joyful. For a moment, the lonely road didn't feel so lonely. After he left, I realized something. Maybe I didn't have a teacher, but I could still share the journey. Maybe my road wasn't empty, maybe. I just hadn't noticed the small companions along the way. The loneliness never disappeared completely. There were still nights when silence pressed heavy on my chest. But now I had tools to fight it. Self-conversations, journaling, small moments with my brother. I began to understand that loneliness wasn't my enemy. It was my training ground. Walking the road alone made me stronger, braver, more resilient. And maybe one day, when I finally found people to speak with, I would be ready. For now, the road stretched ahead, long and uncertain. But I walked it with steadier steps, whispering to myself, I am not truly alone. My voice is with me. My journey is with me. And that is enough for now. Part 7. Breakthrough moments. Progress in English often felt invisible. Day after day, I practiced repeating podcasts, shadowing movies, scribbling sentences in my notebook. Most of the time, I couldn't tell if I was improving. My voice still cracked, my tongue still stumbled, and my mind still hesitated. But then, suddenly, without warning, small breakthroughs began to appear. The first one came on an ordinary morning. I was walking to school with my headphones in, shadowing a podcast about daily habits. Usually, I struggled to keep up, my mouth chasing the speaker's words like a child running after a train. But that day, something clicked. The speaker said, "I usually wake up at 6 o'clock and make myself a cup of coffee." And before I even realized it, I repeated, "I usually wake up at 6 o'clock and make myself a cup of coffee." Not slow, not broken. Time, my voice moved in sync with the recording. The words rolled out smoothly, almost effortlessly. I stopped walking and stared at the ground, stunned. Did that really just happen? It wasn't magic. It was practice finally showing its face. The second breakthrough came during class. The teacher asked a question. "What do you usually eat for breakfast?" Normally, I would shrink, avoiding eye contact, pretending to write in my notebook. But that day, without thinking, my hand went up. "I eat bread and eggs," I said aloud. The class turned. My teacher smiled. "Good," she said, nodding. Just one sentence, just 5 words, but my classmates didn't laugh. No one corrected me harshly. For the first time, English had left the safety of my headphones and entered the real world, and survived. That tiny victory gave me courage. The third breakthrough happened at home. My brother, curious as always, asked me, "Say something in English." He loved to test me to see if I could surprise him. I smiled and replied, "If you give me chocolate, I will teach you a new sentence." He burst out laughing. "You sound like a real English speaker." Of course, I didn't sound like a native. My accent was still thick, my grammar sometimes shaky, but to him it was enough. And to me, it was proof that all those lonely hours in front of the mirror were paying off. The fourth breakthrough came when I was watching a movie, Spider-Man. Normally, I relied heavily on subtitles, reading faster than I listened. But during one scene, Peter Parker said, "With great power comes great responsibility." And I understood instantly. Without reading, the words sank directly into my brain. No translation needed. I rewound the scene and listened again and again. Each time, I smiled wider. For years, English had been a locked door. That night, I felt the key turning. These breakthroughs didn't make me fluent overnight. They didn't erase my fear or my mistakes, but they gave me something stronger than perfection. Hope, because now I had evidence. Evidence that my experiments, my shadowing, my lonely practice, they worked. It reminded me of planting seeds. For weeks, nothing seems to grow. You water, you wait, you doubt. But then, one morning, A tiny green sprout pushes through the soil, small, fragile, but alive. That's what my breakthroughs felt like, green shoots of growth in the garden of silence. Of course, there were still bad days. Days when I couldn't keep up with the audio. Days when my recordings sounded awful. Days when I wondered if the breakthroughs were just luck. But I learned something important. Progress is not a straight line. It's a series of quiet steps and sudden leaps. A whisper followed by a shout. And each breakthrough, no matter how small, became a light on the road ahead. One evening, while journaling, I wrote, "Today I understood a whole sentence without subtitles. Today I spoke in class without fear. Today I laughed in English with my brother. Today I am not the same as yesterday." As I looked at the words, I felt something I hadn't felt before: confidence. Not arrogance, not pride, but a quiet belief that I was capable of more. The road was still long, the mountain still high, but now I had glimpsed the view from halfway up. And once you see that view, you can never go back to the bottom. Part 8. The first conversation. I had dreamed about it for months, the moment when my English would finally leave the safety of my room, my notebook, my headphones, and step into the real world. But when it happened, it was nothing like I imagined. It was a hot afternoon. I had gone downtown to buy school supplies. The streets were crowded, motorbikes buzzing past, vendors shouting, children weaving through the chaos. As I entered a small bookstore, I noticed a man standing near the entrance, looking confused. Tall, blonde, holding a map in his hands. A foreigner. My heart jumped. I had seen tourists before, of course, but I usually avoided them. I didn't want to embarrass myself, didn't want to prove my worst fear, that my English was useless outside of my mirror. But this time was different. The man looked around and said loudly, in English, "Excuse me, does anyone know where the train station is?" No one responded. People glanced at him, shrugged, and walked away. I froze. My mind screamed, "This is your chance. Say something. Help him." But fear gripped me. What if I said it wrong? What if he didn't understand me? What if I stuttered, or worse, said nothing and regretted it forever? The silence stretched. The man sighed and started folding his map. He was about to leave. And then, without thinking, I stepped forward. I can help," I said. The words came out shaky, but they were words. English words. The man looked at me, his eyes brightening. "Oh, thank you. Do you know the train station?" For a second, my brain went blank. My heart raced so fast, I thought it would explode. But then, the shadowing practice, the podcasts, the little conversations with myself, full of it, rushed back like water breaking a dam. Yes, I said, slowly. You go straight, 2 blocks, then turn left. The station is there. I pointed with my hand, hoping my gestures would fill the gaps my words couldn't. The man studied me, then smiled. Straight, 2 blocks, then left. Perfect. Thank you so much. And just like that, it was over. He walked away, waving, and I stood frozen in the bookstore doorway. My legs were trembling, my palms sweaty, but my chest felt like it was on fire. I had spoken. I had been understood. It wasn't a long conversation. It wasn't perfect grammar, but it was real. A real exchange, a real connection in real English. I wanted to shout. I wanted to run home and tell my notebook, my mirror, my headphones, we did it. We finally did it. That night, I replayed the moment again and again in my head. The nervousness, the stumbles, the relief when he understood. And each time, my fear seemed smaller, my courage bigger. I realized something important. The first conversation doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to happen. After that, I started noticing foreigners more often. At the market, on the bus, in the park. My eyes followed them, my ears sharp for English words. I didn't always approach them, but I wanted to. The fear was still there, but now it had cracks. And through those cracks, light was entering. A week later, I had another chance. This time, at a cafe, a tourist couple sat beside me, struggling to order. The waiter looked helpless. My hands trembled under the table. Should I help? Should I speak? I took a deep breath and said, "Excuse me, do you need help?" They turned, surprised. The woman smiled. "Yes, please. We want tea, but no sugar." Kana translated for the waiter, then turned back to them. "Okay, they understand now." "Thank you," the man said warmly. I smiled, shy but proud. "You're welcome." It was only 2 sentences, but it felt like climbing another mountain. These small conversations changed something deep inside me. I began to see English not as a subject in school, not as a collection of grammar rules, but as a bridge. A bridge that connected me to strangers, to stories, to the wider world. And each time I dared to cross that bridge, my steps grew steadier. That night, in my journal, I wrote, "Today, I spoke to real people in English. Not my mirror, not my headphones, but people. They understood me. I was nervous, but I did it. I am walking on the bridge." It wasn't fluency, it wasn't perfection, but it was the beginning of something I had long dreamed of, the beginning of conversations that were real, alive, human. And I knew this was only the first of many. Part 9: A New Identity. The first conversations were like sparks in the dark small, fragile but powerful enough to light the road ahead. After helping the tourist with the map, after ordering tea for the couple, I began to feel something I never expected, a shift inside me. For so long, English had been a burden. Heavy textbooks, red marks on exams, laughter at my mistakes. A language that reminded me of my limits, my silence, my loneliness. But now, English was changing shape. It was no longer just a subject in school. It was becoming a voice inside me. I noticed it in small moments. When I woke up, the first thought that came wasn't always in my native language. Sometimes it was English. I am tired. I want more sleep. When I watched movies, I caught myself repeating lines unconsciously, like shadowing had become part of my body. I'll be back. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. The phrases stuck to me like tattoos, reshaping the rhythm of my thoughts. Even my dreams began to shift. One night, I dreamt of walking through a city where everyone spoke English. At first, I panicked, couldn't escape. I couldn't ask for help. But then, in the dream, I opened my mouth and answered. And the people smiled, nodding as if I belonged. I woke up trembling, but with a strange kind of joy. English wasn't just entering my brain, was entering my soul. At school, my classmates began to notice. "You're speaking more in English class," one of them said. Another asked, "How do you practice? You're getting better." I smiled, but didn't explain everything. How could I describe the long nights of shadowing, the whispered conversations with myself, the journal entries no one ever read? It felt like a secret world, a hidden part of me that was growing stronger in silence. But the truth was undeniable. English was no longer outside me. It was inside. I felt it most clearly when I introduced myself. Before, I would mumble, "My name is," ashamed of my accent rushing through the words. But one day, I looked in the mirror and said confidently, "Hi, my name is, and I am learning English." The sentence was simple, but it felt like more than words. It felt like an identity. I wasn't just a student anymore. Someone who wanted to learn. I was a learner, an English speaker in progress. The difference was subtle but powerful. English began to shape my habits, too. I started labeling objects in my room with sticky notes: mirror, window, chair. I switched my phone to English. I even set reminders in English. Don't give up. Practice today. At first, it felt strange, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. But slowly, the clothes became mine. Friends teased me. "Why is your phone in English? Are you pretending to be American?" I laughed with them, but inside, I knew the truth. I wasn't pretending. I was transforming. Because English wasn't about being American. or British or anyone else. It was about becoming more of myself, version of me who could speak to the world, not just my corner of it. I realized that every word I learned, every sentence I practiced, wasn't just knowledge, it was construction. I was building a new identity, brick by brick, sound by sound, and the old me, the one who hid in silence, who envied others, who feared speaking, was slowly fading. Of course, I still made mistakes. Of course, I still hesitated. But mistakes no longer felt like proof of failure. They felt like steps on the road to who I was becoming one evening. I wrote in my journal, I am not just studying English anymore. I am living it. English is not outside me. It is part of me. It is who I am becoming. When I looked at those words, I didn't just see sentences. I saw transformation. I was no longer just a student on a lonely road. I was a traveler carrying two languages inside me. And for the first time, I felt proud, only of my progress, but of myself. Part 10. The journey continues. The day I realized English had become part of me, I felt both powerful and small. Powerful because I could finally speak with confidence, even if imperfectly. Small because I understood that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Learning a language, I discovered, is not like climbing a mountain where you reach the top and rest. It is more like walking across an endless landscape. Sometimes the road is smooth, sometimes steep, sometimes you walk under a bright sky, sometimes in fog. But always the road continues. I used to dream of a finish line, the day I would be fluent, the day I would speak like a native. But now I no longer care about that image. Fluency is not a trophy. It is a state of movement, a river that keeps flowing. What matters is that I am no longer afraid of the river. I have learned to swim. There are still moments of frustration. Just yesterday, I forgot a simple word in the middle of a conversation and had to pause awkwardly. Another time, I misunderstood a joke and felt left out. The old me would have hidden, ashamed, but now I smile. I remind myself, it is okay. Am learning. Every mistake is proof that I am alive in this language, and strangely, English has taught me something bigger than grammar or vocabulary. It has taught me about being human. I realized that speaking is not only about perfect words. It is about connection. When I listen carefully, when I try to understand another person's feelings. Sometimes broken English feels more honest, more raw, more real. One evening, I spoke with a traveler again, this time at the train station. He was lost, and I offered to help. My sentences were not perfect, but they were enough. At the end, He thanked me warmly. I walked away smiling, not because my English was flawless, but because it was useful. I had helped someone, and that, I realized, was the real purpose of language. Not perfection, not performance, connection. The more I practiced, the more I saw English not as a subject to master, but as a bridge to people, to stories, to new parts of myself. Through podcasts, I listened to voices across the world. Through shadowing, I borrowed their rhythm, their breath, their courage. Through writing in my journal, I discovered thoughts I never knew I had. English became a mirror. In it, I saw my growth, my resilience, my persistence, and maybe that was the greatest gift. Learning English taught me how to learn, how to keep moving even when the road was long. As I write this now, I imagine the future. Perhaps one day I will give a speech in English. Perhaps I will write a book. Perhaps I will simply sit with a friend from another country and laugh freely, without fear of words. I don't know what exactly will happen, but I know this: the journey will continue because language is alive. And as long as I live, I will walk with it. Sometimes I think about the shy person I used to be, the one who sat in silence, the one who envied others, the one who whispered English words in secret. I wish I could go back and tell that version of me, don't be afraid. You don't need a teacher to begin. The teacher is already inside you. Your mistakes will guide you. Your persistence will carry you. And one day, you will speak not perfectly, but freely. I cannot go back in time. But maybe by writing this, by sharing this story, I am speaking to someone else who feels the same way now. To you, the one who feels alone, the one who wants to speak but cannot find a teacher. Trust me. Start where you are. Listen, repeat, shadow, write, speak to yourself. Speak to the world. Little by little, word by word, you will discover the same truth I did. English is not far away. It is already waiting inside you. The journey is long, yes, but the journey is beautiful. And so, with every sunrise, with every word, with every mistake and every victory, I remind myself, this is not the end. This is only the beginning. The journey continues.